Welcome back to Craig's Custom Cooking. Today I'm going to be showing you how to ferment my vegetables that I use. I've had several requests from different viewers on how to ferment them. So I'm going to show you the process. So let me readjust the camera and I'll bring you back. Alright, we're back. This is 10 cups of water that I have in this pan. To this, we're going to add the rest of the ingredients. I use a pickling salt. It's made by Ball. You can get it a lot of different things, people make it, but you want to make sure it's a pickling salt. That way it doesn't have any iodine in it. And that's what you want to use for this recipe. To this 10 cups of water, I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup of salt. I'm going to add 1/4 of a cup of sugar. Anywhere between 3 and 5 pieces of anise. They're broken up, so that better. If they were whole, I'd put between 3 and 5, but since they're broken up, I put a few more. Okay, you're going to add 5 bay leaves. 1 large stick of cinnamon. These are small, so I'm adding 2. And 1 tablespoon. These are Sichuan peppercorns that we get at the Asian market. I don't know if you can get them at your local market, but they're very good. They have a numbing aspect to them. So we're going to put 1 teaspoon of those in. And that's your brine. So we're going to turn the burner on to high. Mix the salt in and the sugar. You're going to bring this pot to a full rolling boil, and you're going to boil for 10 minutes on high. Then we're going to take it off the heat. We're going to let it completely cool down. The longer you can let it set, the more the spices will get into the sauce. Some people, when they pickle their vegetables and everything, they take the spices out. I take the bay leaves out. I leave everything else in. I just think it adds to the flavor of the pickles as they're fermenting. They're already been heated. They're sterilized. So it's not a problem. I use a 1/2 gallon Ball canning jar that I'll show you when we get to the vegetable process. There's 2 types of lids that we can use. One is a regular wide mouth Ball canning lid that you normally see, and then this one is one that's specially made for fermenting. I'll put a link to these in the bottom in the description box, as well as all the instructions on how to make the brine and the pickled vegetables. So as always, this link will be in the description box. You can buy them on Amazon. You get 3 of them for between $21 and $25. The good thing about these lids is they come with an air pump. So once you open your jar, you want to get any bad air out. So all you do is put this over the thing and you vacuum it 2 times. It pulls the air out of the jar. These lids are designed to let the carbon dioxide out, but they don't let any of the oxygen back in the jar. So they're very good. But I'll show you this method too. It's a little more labor intensive, but I used this when I first started out. I didn't have any other way of doing it. So I'll show you the whole process. We're gonna let this heat up and then I'll bring you back. All right, everybody, my timer just went off. It's boiled for 10 minutes. I'm just gonna push it to the back of the stove. I'm just gonna let it cool down now. Welcome back, everybody. These are a Chinese long bean. These are green. They also have purple ones. They're really long, so these are known as a Chinese yard long bean. Now I'm going to take a knife. I'm going to come in about an inch from the end, cut off that part. I'm going to discard these. This is the bottom that grows towards the ground. Let me get these ready. I'll spin them around and bring you back. Alright, this is the other end of the green bean. I'm going to come in again about an inch, and I'm going to cut the end of the bean off, because this has still has some of the leaves that could hold dirt. You don't want that in your preserved vegetables. So we'll discard those. Now these are two beans that I pulled out. This one has a black spot right here. I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to put it on my pile of beans. I'm going to take the next one, which has the same thing. I'm going to cut that. I check every bean individually to make sure that there's no spots on the beans. Okay, now here I have a cookie sheet. I'm going to take my long green beans and I'm going to spread them out on the cookie sheet. Now I'm going to let these air dry overnight. Once they're dry, I'll show you how to put them in the bulk canning jar, put the brine on it, and start the process. Alright, these are the vegetables that I'm going to be using, that I'm also going to pickle. So let me get my knife. I'll come back. I've washed that's a daikon radish. These are sweet peppers, ginger, Chinese cabbage, and these are fingerling carrots. So now the carrots are done. You don't have to do anything with the carrots. They're already completed. You're just going to put them in the jar. They've been washed. We're going to let them air dry. Now we're going to take a pair of scissors and we're going to cut the stem off of all of these peppers. I use a red, yellow, and orange. I get them at Safeway. They come in a pack. They've been washed really good. As you're cutting them off, look for any blemishes or defects. If they don't have a stem, leave it on. Actually, this one has a bad spot. I'm going to lay that aside. Use jalapenos, any other kind of pepper you want. We prefer the sweet peppers. We don't like a hot, spicy pepper. So this is what we use. Now I'm going to set my tray aside. This is my chunk of ginger. So I'm going to cut a small slice off the end. Now I'm going to cut these into 1/4 inch slices. We're just going to leave them like this once they're cut. We'll use these in the top of the pickle jar to hold the rest of the vegetables in so they're not exposed to any oxygen or air. I'd rather sacrifice a piece of ginger than some of the good vegetables. This I will use for cooking later on this week, so I'll set that aside. I'll put the ginger on the plate. Now I'm going to get my daikon radish. This has some of the tops off the peppers on it, so I'm wiping it off. Clean my cutting board. Now I'm going to cut these into 3 sections about 2 inches in length. I'm going to set them aside. Now I'm going to take this and slice it in half. I'm going to slice that in half again. Now you want to cut these into about 1/2 inch thick slices. The thicker they are, the better they are. If they're too thin, they'll actually wilt in a jar and they won't stay crunchy. So the thicker you can keep them, the better off you're going to be. They're going to soften up some, but not as bad as if they were really small. Alright. Cut this one more time, lay that aside. I'm not going to use that. Now I'm going to cut them into about 1/2 inch thick slices. So you have a basically a Julietted cube about 2 inches long. Now I try to get 3 slices out of each one. Works out well, because now they're square and about all the same size. This one, let me do the last one here. Alright, I'm going to finish the rest of these up and I'll bring you back. Alright, this is our Chinese cabbage. It's actually flatter than an American cabbage. I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to cut it into wedges. Now I'm going to take the core out of all 4 pieces. You can pickle these cores if you like. I eat them, so they don't last long once I take them out. I've always loved the core out of a head of cabbage, so that's probably my favorite part of the cabbage. All right, I'm back now. So I'm going to take these and I'm going to cut each wedge into 3 wedges. This is so they're fairly equal size, so they pickle at the same rate. You don't want some really big chunks in there. I've tried it with just cabbage leaves in the past. It doesn't work. They get too soggy. They're just no good. So you want the wedges. I'll show you later on in the video. I put the cabbage in the jars in 2 different ways. And there's a reason for that. This is my ball canning jar, and I'm checking to see if they're going to fit in the jar. Sometimes you have to pop the middle out and put it in separately, just so they'll fit into the jar. That's what I'm explaining here. I have to apologize. When I made the video, it didn't record the audio. I don't know where I went here. I think my dog was needing something, so I went to take care of him. I apologize. We're going to try to fit all of these long green beans into this half-gallon jar. I take them, I pick them up, I line all the ends on one end because there's some of them are different lengths. So I want the tops to be all at the same position when we put them in the jar. So let me get these ready. I get them all picked up here. There we go. Now I finally have them all up. Now we're going to stick them in the jar. Hardest part is getting the short ones into at the same time, so you got to work with it a little bit. But we'll get them in. Now what I do is I hold the beans and then I twist the jar and the beans at the same time in opposite directions. This will twist them as you push them down in the jar. Now, in this particular instance, I had to cut the tops off because they were too long. Now I'm going to push them down in the jar really well. That one's fighting me. I got them down in the jar quite a ways. And there's a reason for that. And I'll show you in just a minute. The tops that I had to cut off because they wouldn't fit in the jar, because you don't want to break them. You want to keep them as long as you possibly can. I'm going to put these in on top of the other beans and pack them in really good. Now when you're fermenting vegetables, you don't need to leave hardly any head space at the top. This isn't like where you're going to heat the substance and it could expand and break the jar or misform the lid. You can fill these jars completely up to the top as long as you can get enough brine in to cover the vegetables. You always want the vegetables to be submerged under the liquid. So there is my jar with all my long beans inside. Now, I'm going to take my pickling brine that I made yesterday, and I'm going to fill my jar. I actually made 3 jars. I made 1 jar of this. You'll see the other 2 jars later on in the video. I had to make more pickling brine. I didn't have enough. The recipe that I put in the description box under this, if you're going to make 3 of these jars, you need to double the recipe that I put on the video. Now there, I bring it up almost to the top. It's probably down about 1/4 inch. This is Bacardi. It's 40% alcohol. You're going to put 2 tablespoons of this on top of each jar that you pickle. Helps kill any bacteria that might form. It's a really good way to preserve the vegetables. The vegetables will not taste like alcohol. There's not enough in here to affect the taste of the product. This is a ball canning lid. This is what I used to use when I first started. As you're fermenting this, you're going to see a lot of bubbles come up as this ferments. If you use the ball canning lid, you have to crack it every day. So the bubbles will come out. It doesn't build up a lot of pressure in a jar. If it does, it's going to buckle your lid. It's not going to work. This is a lid designed strictly for fermenting these vegetables. It has a valve in the middle that lets carbon dioxide out. No oxygen can get in. You can buy them on Amazon. They run between $21 and $25 for 3 of them. So here, you just seal this jar and you're done. You're going to put it in a dark place, preferably a pantry where it's cool. It's going to take anywhere from 14 to 20 days to ferment. Now, this is my other ball canning jar. This one I'm going to put the cabbage in the bottom. So let me get some of this, start putting it in. I actually had to break some of the centers out of these so they'd fit in a jar a lot easier. You want to put it in the bottom, and then we're going to try to pack it down with something. You want to try to push it down and compress it in the bottom. You want to take up as much space in the jar as you can. If it's got a lot of room around it, it's not going to hurt the fermenting process at all. It's just you're not going to be able to get as many vegetables in the jar. So let me put a couple more pieces of cabbage in here. Push it down. And this cabbage will come out fairly crisp. It keeps a good crisp flavor to it. Now I'm going to take some of the daikon radishes. I'm going to put them in. I like to try to get them all to one side. So I'm working here to rearrange them so they're all on one side of the jar. Now I'm going to put a few more in.
Sorry, I got out of the camera shot. You couldn't see that. But now I'm going to take the peppers, and I'm going to start packing the peppers in besides the daikon radishes. There's 4. Get another one in there. I do fit 2 more in there, but this one was curved, so I took it back out. All right, I think I have enough. Now I'm going to top it with carrots. I also take my carrots, I fill up any voids along the side. That just allows you to get more vegetables in the jar. There's no race at this. You're not in a big hurry. Just take your time. Try to fill up as much jar space as you can. Now I'm going to take my ginger and I'm going to wedge it under the edge of the jar. Like I said before, this does 2 things. It kind of flavors it with the ginger. It also holds all your vegetables under the liquid, so you don't have to worry about anything being exposed to the air. Now this is where I started putting my brine in. I realized I didn't have enough. So later on in the video you'll see me making more brine to my left on the stove as I'm packing the rest of the vegetables. Now I'm going to put a lid on this just temporarily until my other brine is ready. I want to keep as much bad air out of the jar as I can. That's my brine. Usually what I do is I fill up my 3 jars with water, and that's the amount of brine that I make. I pour that into a pan, that's the amount of brine I make. Now granted, when you put the vegetables and the other stuff in, it's going to be more than you need, but you'll use it later on. Just put it in a jar and seal it. Now here I'm putting the daikon radishes in the bottom first. Now I'm putting my peppers in. Now my hand's too big to fit in this jar, so this is sometimes a chore for me. I got to get a spatula or something. If you have a small hand and it fits in the top of the jar, that's great for you, because then you can pack the stuff in very well. My hand just it never fits in the top of this jar. Now my wife can. She's got a very small hand, so she can get in there. And see, this is the bent one. I have a real hard time trying to get that one in there, but I get it. You just got to be patient, work with it. I believe this is my last pepper. It's fighting me for dear life. All right, now I'm going to put the carrots in. This should be the rest of my carrots. All right, I'm going to try to smooth them around, push some of them down, take up some extra space. Now I'm going to put my cabbage on top, because sometimes you just want cabbage, and if it's in the very bottom of the jar, you got to disturb all the other vegetables, everything, to get out of the jar. So I alternate how I put my cabbage in the jars. It just makes it easier. If you just want cabbage, you open this jar, you get it out, you move on. By the time you use all the other vegetables in the other jar, then you can get to the cabbage. So I'm going to put as much cabbage in here as I can. Any leftover cabbage that I have, I'll just make into coleslaw. I'll put a few of the loose leaves in to take up some space. They'll probably wilt up pretty good, but they'll still be good. Now, I'm going to take my ginger. Like I have 5 slices left. I'm going to pack that in the top of the jar. And I hate to be redundant, but this helps keep your vegetables under the brine. There's nothing more annoying than taking all this time to make vegetables and then they're ruined because they were exposed to the air, and once something spoils on the top, it naturally migrates down through the rest of the jar. So you want to keep this brine as pure as you possibly can. Anytime you take something out of these jars, you want to sterilize whatever you have. Here is my finished jar. I'm going to set it aside for now because I don't have any more brine. Now, I'm going to show you the difference between the ones I just pickled and the ones that have been pickled. These are bright green. These haven't even started to ferment yet. These have been fermented. So they take on a lighter green, kind of a brownish tinge to it, but they're still very good. If I have any leftover brine, I'll fill this jar up completely to the top. So that are the beans, or that is the beans. This is another jar that I just made. It has the daikon radishes, the peppers, and the cabbage in it. This is one that I pickled, a month or so ago. Has the cabbage in the bottom, has the peppers. It has celery root, has cucumbers, some garlic. There's a whole lot of different vegetables in this jar. Now here again, I will fill this jar up with the leftover brine that I have, just so it keeps the vegetables submerged underneath. I also have some weights coming this weekend that you can put on the top of the vegetables that'll weight them down under the brine. And I'll show you that when it comes. Now, I always put these in my pantry where it stays dark. And once I close the doors on it, it stays dark so there's no direct light on it, and it maintains a temperature of about 65 degrees. So you definitely don't want to leave these out in direct sunlight. You want to ferment them in a dark, cool place. That just brings out all the good flavors. Now the other thing is, when you open these pickles, they're going to have a different smell than a vinegar pickle. These have a distinctive odor. And after you do this long enough, you'll get to understand what that odor is. And you'll know that your pickles are good. So there'll also be a little bit of sediment that comes out of the vegetables that'll be in the jar. So if you move them around, you're going to see stuff floating around in it. It's not spoiled by any means. Now I have to go get the pickle jar I'm going to show you. It was sitting on my kitchen table. This is a large Chinese pickle jar. You put all your vegetables in it. You fill it with your brine to the top. Then you take this glass lid. This is the way Chinese have pickled their vegetables for thousands of years. You put the lid upside down and you fill this ring with water. Keep it full of water. Every day or so, check it. You never want this ring to dry out. As the vegetables ferment and as the bubbles come up out of the thing, this will percolate. It'll allow the air and the carbon dioxide to come out through the water. It stops any oxygen from getting in. This is a miniature one. This one I already have pickles in. As you can see, I already have the water in the top. it's been fermented for a month or more. Now sometimes I do take the top off because the water that's in there gets a little bit gnarly looking. So I take a paper towel, I clean everything out real good, I wash the cap, I fill the ring back up with water, put it back in my pantry, and we're good to go. I've known Chinese people that have passed the same brine down from generation to generation. It can be reused over and over and over as long as you keep it pure and clean. There's no reason to have to make new brine. All you do, this is a gallon jar that I made. This has carrots, celery, daikon radish, and cabbage. This one's very easy to get the stuff out of, so I do like to use this one. It has a plastic lid, doesn't affect the way it ferments. You just still have to burp it every so often. I just crack it open, let the air come out. Once all the air stops coming out, it stops bubbling, you reseal the lid, put it back in the pantry. Now, if you use a ball canning jar and the pressure builds up too much, it does one of two things. It'll either buckle the lid, or when you open it up, it's gonna explode like a volcano. It's gonna come out the top, it's gonna get all over everything. It's gonna be a complete mess. So what you do is you open it up. Once the volcano stops erupting, everything settles down. It's not the end of the world. You just fill the jar with new pickling brine, close the lid, let the fermentation continue, but remember, keep cracking that lid. You got to let the air out. As always, if you like our channel, please subscribe, hit the like button and the bell, and you'll be notified of any upcoming videos. Have a great day.